interviewed him. This is like the third interview he's ever done.
Yeah, he's stayed in the background of a lot of things, but because of that, he's been able to. He's a real watcher, and that's just Doug's style. He was my father's first attorney during Watergate, and he attended my mother's funeral, and
right.
It was such a strange day because it was on a little hill, and it was windy, and it was cold, and all of a sudden lightning started, the clouds and that, and lightning strikes started, happening, and thunder was rolling just as her internment ceremony was going on. I mean, it was just supernatural. But I bet she was pissed, and that's why she did that.
Hey, real quick, before we get into the book about your mom, because you just wrote this new book called Dorothy, an Amoral and Dangerous Woman, the Murder of E. Howard Hunt's Wife. And there's a link to that on the Opperman Report blog and also on OppermanReport.com bookstore. But now Caddy comes on the show, and I got a couple of questions for you. One is, first of all, why wouldn't your dad hire... He must have known like a really good high-powered criminal defense attorney. Why would he hire Doug Caddy to handle that?
Wow, the origins of Doug Caddy are unknown to me. It's possible that Chuck Colson knew him and recommended him to my dad, or I'm not really sure how they met. But
you got to listen to the interview then.
His duties were just basically to get the initial, boys out of jail and to give my father some advice and things like that. He didn't remain my father's attorney for very long.
Right.
But he remained a family friend for ever after that.
Now, one more question for you is that it's stuck in my mind after talking to Caddy. Now, here you got these Watergate burglars, like guys like Sturgis and your dad, right? Tough guys, Now, why did they just go peacefully when the cops showed up?
Why didn't they what?
Why did they go peacefully and quietly when the cops showed up?
Oh, because I think that was just... they weren't cowboys, really. I mean, they had been. All those guys were dangerous at one time in their lives, and still quite able to do anything in the pursuit of liberating Cuba. But I think they were just in such shock, and cops had drops on them, and it was like, they had their guns drawn. The entry team didn't have weapons, and certainly that just would have made it worse. I mean, if they had, I don't even think there would have been a shootout, but I think they just trusted in the powers that be to get them out, and everything just was going to disappear with no problems at all. But that's not the way it worked out, of course.
Okay. Interesting, because I think Caddy said that the next day, the first thing that E. Howard Hunt said was, it was a setup, we were set up.
Yeah, he felt that way, very much so. I think the Watergate break-in, which is really a series of Watergate break-ins, there's like an onion, onion skin. There's 2 or 3 levels of operations going on at one time, with each team member not fully knowing that the other one is there for perhaps a completely different reason, working secretly with someone, other than the person that's working with the other burglars. And I think that's exactly what happened with McCord. Certainly he was the most suspect of all of them. I mean, the Cubans were all brothers, but one of the Cubans was still on the CIA payroll. My father was secretly on the CIA, still with the CIA, and he reported directly to Dick Helms. Everything that was going on with the larger operation, which was called Gemstone, and that had a number of fingers branching out for different illegal covert operations. And so I know my dad was one of those guys that had ulterior or other motives. So I know McCord seemed to be too. My mother did not trust McCord. So it's still somewhat of a mystery. There's a lot of speculation about it. I think Doug probably would know a lot about it. You know.
One more question about Doug, and then we'll move on and really devote this show to the honor of your mother and the book you wrote about your mom. But now Doug made this comment. Doug, not more than a comment. He says that when he spoke to your dad the last time, and he asked your dad the motivation behind the murder of JFK, that your dad said it was the alien presence. What do you make of that?
Yeah. You know, that's really an astounding statement. I heard that interview, and I heard Doug say that. It just, I mean, I still can't really close my mouth. You know, it's still kind of hanging open. And I know Doug to be a completely forthright and honest person. And if Doug says that that's what my dad told him, then that's what my dad told him. You know, now, my dad could have been feeding him disinformation. You know, he was good at that. He spent his whole life convincing his family and his friends that he was something other than what he was. So,
but your dad never said anything like that to you?
That's an astounding statement. Kennedy was killed because of the alien presence. I mean, that's, to me, it just stretches it a little too far, but there's a whole bunch of people that believe, in that. I think there was a lot more down-to-earth reasons why Kennedy was killed. We all know.
Yeah.
You know, there was, the oil, the oil situation and the silver, and the Fed, was, he wanted to put an end to that. Vietnam and all that stuff. And, of course, what I found out from my dad, one thing was the mob, people think that the mob was directly involved, and there's evidence that they were involved. As a matter of fact, my dad had been working with John Roselli numerous times on plans to kill Castro. The reason the mob never really succeeded is because the CIA was not interested in really following through with the mob. They just wanted to keep them sort of busy and in the loop somewhat in case the real operation was discovered or disclosed somehow.
Yeah.
They could blame it on the mob because it's logical. Hey, the mob had hitmen. Kennedy, they lost Cuba, and Kennedy and his brother Bobby were going after, the mob with a vengeance. And that's one of the reasons they kept them around for that. But the CIA didn't seriously engage the mafia to kill Kennedy at all. So that's what I think and know from talking to my father. But it was a cover story that was ready to be utilized,
Okay, but back to Caddy for 1 second, because he comes off to me as an extremely sober guy, worked for John Dean in the White House, and worked with your dad. Your dad definitely respected him. Now, your dad never talked to you about alien presence, never even a hint.
No.
Never talked about UFOs.
No.
Hey, Barney Hill, nothing.
No, he never talked about UFO. I mean, he would refer to the people that lived in the city around him as aliens a lot of times, but he was mean-spirited in many respects. He was a racist and came from that WASP mentality. Of course, he didn't make the cut into Yale. He went to Brown, which was somewhat a few rungs lower. But he never said anything about aliens.
Hey, real quick, what was that story?
He never said anything about Kennedy until a few years before he died. So.
And what was that story about your dad? He had a problem with the neighbors across the street. I think their cats or their dogs or pigeons or something.
Yeah, when he got out of prison, he moved to Guadalajara. I went down to visit him, and he had this nice house, and right across the street was another nice house. But on the roof of that house is a 2-story home with a flat roof, Mexican style, and there was a rooster and chickens and crow every morning at 4:30.
Right.
Just endlessly, and my father just being driven, berserk, and I can see him just practically frothing at the mouth, his tongue twitching in his mouth and his fingers, rubbing on. He's got to figure out how to get rid of this thing. So he did. He got some rat poison, and put it into ice cubes, froze him up, and then with a slingshot, shot him across the street over on the roof. The ice cube melts, the rooster eats poison, no more rooster problem.
And then they arrested some guy down the street named Oswald, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, he had the tattoo all picked out.
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah. All right, man. Listen, enough of me. Okay. Tell us about the new book. Now, this just came out, right?
It'll be out in a couple of weeks, really, between around the 13th or 15th of October. And this was really a labor of love and deep emotional angst for me. It's called Dorothy, an Amoral and Dangerous Woman, which is a CIA quote, how they described her. And the murder of E. Howard Hunt's wife, Watergate's darkest secret, because many people don't know or remember that one of the greatest and mysterious episodes about Watergate was what they call the Watergate plane crash, in which the United Airlines flight leaving from Washington on its way to Chicago or Omaha and stopping in Chicago. All of a sudden, the pilot said, it was one of the best pilots that they had, Captain Wendell Whitehouse. He had 18,000 hours flight time. He'd been in a Boeing 737 for 2,400 hours. He'd been a pilot since 1956, never a problem. His first officer and second officer equally qualified. So this plane comes down, and my mother's on it. She knew she'd been being followed by, she didn't. She assumed it was either FBI or CIA or other people that Nixon had put onto her, because they were involved in this what I call the war with Nixon, and it was this the demands of blackmailers, my father and mother, for money, and a lot of it. A real lot of it. And Nixon didn't have a problem with coming up with $1 million cash to pay my father off, not to pay everybody off, but just my dad. He feared the information that my dad had. And, the money started drying up, and my father and mother started threatening Nixon's people directly, saying, we have evidence, we'll blow you out of the White House. I'll bring Ehrlichman and Haldeman down to their knees. And then all of a sudden, boom, she's dead. And my father pleaded guilty a week later to the charges. And years later, when we were spending time in the last years of his life, he finally revealed to me that he'd always thought that she had been murdered. Although he and I, argued or we disagreed, because I started feeling that there was more to it than just a plane crash, pilot error is what they called it. But he was adamant about, no, nothing like that would go on. No, that's just crazy talk. But that was his role, to deny all the things, But he was worried about the safety of his children, because he felt the next threat was the wife's dead, now the children can be threatened. He's in prison. We have nobody to guard us. And, there was so many things about that flight. Certainly Nixon and Colson definitely knew of the flight to Chicago. Certainly my mother was being followed. She was picking up cash from the White House, with these very dark and dangerous places, Greyhound bus depots and airport lockers and things like that in the wee hours. I went with her on one, and she was afraid. She was scared, but she was.
How old were you?
She wasn't going to back down either. The FBI was all over the plane crash.
Right. How old were you when you went with your mom to pick up the money?
Pardon me?
How old were you when you went with your mom to pick up the money?
I was around 17, so I was, already pretty well formed. We'd spent that summer after she came back from her trip to England with the other kids. We'd spent wonderful times together. It was the first time I really was looking at my mom as like a different person other than just mommy. And I think she was feeling the same thing about me. This is my, young man son, and he's a good person. And, she revealed a lot of heartache in her life. And, I wrote this little part in the book. She says, I saw a woman drained of hope but not hopeless, robbed of faith but not faithless, denied of love but not loveless. I also saw fierce loyalty, endless compassion, and unbreakable strength in her. And, she really was like that. Colson and Nixon knew that my mom was they call it a very savvy woman. She was very savvy, and she keeps that whole family together, and